Hello, everyone. My name is Kellyn Gorman. I am the Director of Data and AI at Silk and a DZone core member, and I am so happy to see you here at PlatformCon 24. I am joined with a number of people to talk about platform engineering and AI. Let's talk with a few of our panelists here. I'm going to start out with Ryan, who happens to be just right next to me here on the panel. So Ryan, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kellyn. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. Happy good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm a principal consultant and executive technical director at Thoughtworks, which is a global consultancy that's hopefully known by many folks here for our work in engineering excellence and testing and platform engineering. And so I've worked with clients across the globe on platform strategy, including architecture and infrastructure for over 10 years. And so I'm really happy to be here today to share what we've been doing recently around our developer productivity and also around how GenAI fits into the picture of platform engineering and the SDLC more broadly.
Excellent. Then I'll go to Sandra. Sandra, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Kellyn. Thank you for having me today in the panel. Very happy to share with everyone the experience that we have had. Currently, I'm a senior manager of the machine learning team in Mercado Libre. Mercado Libre is an e-commerce and fintech company in LATAM. And well, we are happy to share all the experience that we have had with our team and how we have been embracing this technology. Again, happy to be sharing this panel with all the guys today.
Oh, we look forward to it, definitely. And Chiradeep, your turn.
Hi, good morning. Calling in from California. Right now, I'm the CTO of a startup that's trying to help people get AI apps to production quickly. Before that, I was in a fintech where we built a number of GenAI apps to help underwriting and risk management. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in infrastructure, cloud computing control planes, cloud native, Kubernetes, etc.
Well, I know that AI is on everybody's top of their mind. It's everything that we're thinking about right now. I know DZone, we just finished our platform engineering and AI trends report. It's something that I enjoyed writing on myself. I'm going to start with Ryan because Ryan, of course, you got to introduce yourself first. We'll just go kind of around the room here. Tell me a little bit about what you've been working on and how the role of collaboration impacts, along with communication, in accelerating and maximizing the use of GenAI within your teams.
Thanks, Kellyn. You know, the joy of being a consultant in a global company is that we get to see a lot of things that are happening in a lot of organizations of different sizes and even different domains. And so one of the things that I think is really fascinating about this particular tool, you know, which is GenAI, which is, of course, really a whole suite of tools that work differently, is that there's so many opportunities for people to learn and to innovate with the tool sets that they have. So I think the clients that we're seeing that are getting the most lift out of GenAI are the ones that are really setting up a kind of AI operating model where people on the ground are able to share what they're learning. There's so many things, you know, beyond code complete. And of course, that's a table stakes sort of thing. But when we start to really think about the value of prompt engineering and to be able to create applications, you know, RAG style applications, what we found is that the companies that are really moving fast are doing a great job of sharing experiences between teams and between people, and sort of really building, when someone discovers a way, a certain prompting technique, for example, that works, or a certain way of integrating documentation, you know, into a more RAG style application, being able to share that across teams is critical, because there really is just a constant, there are constantly new tools and there are constantly new techniques that are working, and organizations that think they're just going to implement GenAI are going to be limited to, you know, to be really being kind of behind the times of whatever their core tool sets, you know, whether it's the GitHubs or the Atlassians, whatever they're rolling out. It's just not enough. So I think that companies need to make sure that they're not just thinking of this as a technology rollout, but there really is a learning loop. You know, the classic build, measure, learn loop that we all know in the product space really has its own reality here in the GenAI rollout space. And giving people, for example, we've been doing a lot of work and just recently released an open source tool that we call Haven, which is basically a portal where you can, lots of people can do prompt sharing, but across, not tool specific, right? But instead prompt sharing across different types of applications you might build, and also just to give people visibility to the applications and the various uses of GenAI that are happening throughout the organization. We think that that's a really big deal in being able to get the most value out of GenAI, because I think the game still is very much about learning and sharing learning quickly.
And prompt sharing is really important. That idea that people can learn from each other as they become better with it. That's really impressive.
Yeah, one of the things that we've found really interesting is that, like, one of our clients in the financial services space, would talk about how business units traditionally didn't really share anything because most of the work they did, they felt like was really unique to their particular business line. But this isn't the case, right? You could have a prompting technique that somebody invents in one business line, and it's totally relevant to other business lines. It might be relevant to platform engineering. It might be relevant to the SDLC. You just never know where a certain technique really might get some traction and might be useful to others. And so I think it really stretches us to think about collaborating in ways across teams and across even parts of the business that we probably haven't done in the past.
Impressive. So Sandra, you have over 15,000 developers that are kind of working with you in that. How are you taking on this kind of challenge?
Well, actually, it has been a big challenge. What we did at the beginning was a hackathon. So we invited the whole community. We have more than 1,000 developers participating in that, but not only developers. And aligned with Ryan, what he was sharing before, we found a great value of having multidisciplinary teams working together. So actually, just something to share there. One of the teams that was like the winner of this hackathon, there was a team of people that did even know each other like the day before. They just joined the hackathon, introduced themselves, and they won because they have different ideas. Some of them knew about the technology, but actually no one was an expert on it. And well, what we learned from that was, first, we have to give the technology like available to everyone in the company. And nowadays we have legal teams working with generative AI, the people team also, human resources, they have ideas and they are developing there. So having the platform that help us to spread the knowledge and spread the technology has been one of our main priorities and like a strategy. So nowadays, generative AI is available for everyone. Code completion, as Ryan was sharing as well, of course, that's like the main one for the developers. But now we're facing how to give tools to other teams in the company because we have been seeing a great value of sharing that knowledge and giving all these ideas that people has, but normally they think like, I can't do it because it's so difficult and I'm not an expert. Well, with generative AI, we're seeing that it's more simple than before. So we're seeing huge impact there.
More no code options. Is that what you're talking about? Those that aren't more technical. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we are trying to build also using tools that are already in the market, but also leveraging our internal platform to develop these kind of tools, no code for all the companies. So not only having 16,000 developers, but now we have 60,000 people working with that kind of tools inside the company.
But we're still feeling pretty safe in our roles. Those of us that are technical people that write code, it's all right. It's all right. So
yeah, completely.
Go ahead.
No, I was wanna share that it's not like taking out that part of the work is how you give them tool to leverage the technology, but being able to, the way of having that is because we have the developers to build those tools, right? So it's part of the complete ecosystem that we have.
Well, folks a lot of times talk about the 87 million jobs that'll go away with AI. They don't often talk about the 92 million that are created by it. So I think that's really important as we hear, kind of that hot button that everybody freaks out about, but there is a really big like silver lining around it as well. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty safe in my job. It's all right. So get into like data security. So Ryan, you said something about fintech. I do healthcare and fintech. I know about data security and the concerns. Now, Chiradeep, this is something that is kind of, important to you. You're very aware of this. How do you approach data security when it comes to AI? And what do you think are some recommended practices?
Yeah, I think like the other panelists were saying, collaboration is key. So you have to get compliance and legal and security involved early on so that they're comfortable with the technology. Once they're comfortable that, the AI company is not going to train on your data, they're not going to, share your data with other tenants on the same API, that's when you start, checking what are the access that the AI has. And quite often, this is actually a security and even a reliability issue, because if you give AI a full access to your database, it could be pretty disastrous. So it's a lot of education of the developers, making sure that they're not giving excessive permissions to the AI. And then once the AI has responded, you can put in various tools to redact PII to mask the sensitive information, or even just drop the response when the AI has stepped outside its bounds. A related aspect is that when the AI hallucinates, and then that's very important to catch, because if that hallucination ends up in your customer's hands, then it could be a reputation risk. So it's a lot of minefields, which we are currently stepping around.
So around that whole idea of masking, and as you're training these models, do you ever worry as we mask that data that we could end up poisoning our large language models at all?
Yeah, it's important to not, feed the data back to the AI to, retrain it. It could get counterproductive, like you're saying, that it just starts feeding on itself, and then it starts getting locked into a particular way of answering, whereas you want it to be more creative. So I would strongly, advise against, putting the output of the model back into the model, unless you're trying to train a lower powered model to make it more capable. Yeah.
Excellent. So Ryan, question for you. What kind of trends are you starting to see, around Gen AI and where companies are headed?
I think the most important thing is, I mentioned earlier, is the term Gen AI is so easy to throw around, but the amount of tools and the sophistication that is rapidly growing in this space is unbelievable. Like what Chiradeep was just saying around security. If you think about what it takes to secure your data, if you're actually building maybe a multi-agent type of solution, this is infinitely more complex, but it's certainly far more complex than if you're deploying code complete. Right. And so I think that what we're seeing in terms of trends partly are some organizations are still really being very cautious and deploying things like code complete and other things that are fairly mature and also integrated with their tool sets. And the companies that are there are only a few companies that we're seeing at scale that are really going after things the way it sounds like Sandra and Chiradeep and others are going after. And I think that the companies that are doing that well are investing in being able to build architectures for Gen AI applications. That's one thing that I think is really important, is like, if you are at a certain scale, if you have those 15,000 developers, and many of our clients do, then there's a lot of value potentially to be captured by getting out ahead and figuring out what you can do with more complex architectures and RAG style applications. But then you also have to make that investment in security and in being thoughtful. And there are so many dimensions as you get into building your own Gen AI applications around handling things like prompt injection and thinking about cost optimization and avoiding hallucination and fact checking. Great tools are showing up on the market every day, like Nemo and other things, to help us keep these applications safe. But there is definitely a lot. Most companies I'm seeing are not preparing to make this investment seriously, because there's just an order of magnitude more complexity when you really start to optimize. That said, I do also think that we're starting to see people realizing, and we've been talking about this at Thoughtworks for probably over a year now, is within the SDLC specifically, there's so much opportunity for Gen AI upstream in the process. The code complete is really reductive in some ways in terms of the gain it can get. We got those slightly bogus statistics of a 50% increase in productivity, but what we've noticed is that companies are finally realizing that the actual coding phase of the SDLC for most organizations is only a fraction of what an engineer is actually doing end to end. And so the gain you might get on non-trivial code and that you might get across your SDLC turns out to be a lot smaller. And so we think that there's actually a huge amount of opportunity, and we are seeing more and more companies starting to think about how do we write better requirements? How do we have the interface between product and engineering be facilitated? How can we notice things that might be being missed during design thinking? How do we review architecture and use architecture diagrams with multimodal LLMs? There's a lot of, I think anything that you can do early in the SDLC really has a huge knock-on effect to overall developer productivity, much more so than really improving typing speed. So I think that's the trend that we're seeing amongst the leading companies, is really getting creative about how to use AI as early as they can in the SDLC and be able to sort of make sure that the right work is getting done and it's getting done right, rather than just making typing faster. That's pretty reductive.
Versus kind of putting AI in everything. That's what I see. Everybody's like, I have AI in all these products, and it's like, are you actually using it right? And it's actually providing value. I think that's one of the big challenges. We won't talk.
By the way, that's for sure. That's another
Microsoft.
thing that we've also noticed, is that there's, for all the excitement, most companies are still not really sure that they're actually getting value, and most companies are definitely way behind in terms of being able to measure impacts of smaller portions of any of the value stream of whether it's the software delivery cycle or bigger value streams. Most companies are in pretty poor shape when it comes to measuring things like DORA, that everybody's excited about, are really super high level and end-to-end metrics. Like, it's almost impossible to see the value of AI unless you've got a very good measurement system for looking at microtasks. I'm really curious to hear what Sandra and others are doing in that space.
I was going to ask her next. You have a certain stance, what you set up for your processes and how you get value from your development with this. What is your stance on that?
Well, actually, I was trying not to unmute myself and let Ryan finish, because, well, that was a big challenge for us, like how to have this ROI analysis, right? Like, we're investing in code completion, and it's really giving back, and we face exactly what you're saying. It's not as much as expected at the beginning, and it's just for one piece of the process. So what we did, having like data, of course, is going to be the answer. We split the process and we start like to measure in different stages. And we saw at the end, like, we have like a bottleneck, because we were having code faster, but we didn't have like the tools to make sure it was of like good quality, and the revision at the end was taking longer, right? So it's like compensating some of the phases with the phases ahead. Now, of course, we're working on that because we think that we have there an opportunity. We already have an impact, so we want to have more. And what we are facing is how to leverage AI like in the process ahead. So how to fix, how to find bugs easier, how to understand like the way of giving the developers like tools that help them to solve the problems, not only to code them, but to solve them, right? Like how to give them another kind of use of the technology, and not just like more code quicker. Fortunately, quality was not impacted. That was also another KPI that we had in mind, because we were afraid of that. Quality wasn't impacted, but wasn't even improved either. Like we were also expecting that maybe it was getting better, wasn't, but at least wasn't being impacted negatively. So, well, we have a good experience on that, but of course it was a challenge to check that. And of course, if you don't have the data to do it, it's very difficult to understand if it's really impacting or not the business at all, having that kind of investments.
Excellent. So Chiradeep, we were talking about some of these confusions that folks have, that they put AI into everything, or they just say they're AI and they're not. If you were to explain to a stakeholder or to a user, what is the difference between regular applications and Gen AI? How do you get right down to the nitty gritty to get it through, to them to say, this is that difference?
Yeah, I think one important difference is that an AI application is more like an ML application. And I think ML engineers understand that you don't get 100% accuracy on your model, right? And so, but when a regular old software engineer is coding an application, business expects it to work just like a regular application, that, every piece of data I give it, it's going to give an accurate response. And so this is one important thing that even the developers don't realize, because they do a few prototypes and they get great results from the AI. But when they put it in production, they find that, 20% of the results are garbage, and we can't show this to the end user. And so the importance of understanding that, you could have mistakes, and how do you continually improve that loop, that prompt engineering loop, the evaluation loop, and maybe change models. And so it's a different kind of optimization that you have to do, rather than just take, write unit tests and integration tests and then regression tests. It's the regression test especially is quite important, because the smallest change in the prompt can lead to vastly different results in the end. So I find that most platform teams and even developer teams are not aware of this. Businesses certainly are not aware of this. But nonetheless, it's exciting, because I think they're talking about other people getting involved, and I'm finding that product managers are, they don't need to write code, but they open up a ChatGPT console and say, hey, if I did this and did that, could I get a good results? And they get good results, and then they say, hey, engineering team, please develop this. But they
Oh, we may have lost Chiradeep. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
I don't know if we caught your last sentence there. You may want to repeat that just in case.
So yeah, I think this the statistical nature or the random nature of the LLM in responding, I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So let's kind of change gears. Ryan, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to read it because I want to make sure that I catch all the little nuances of it. What are some anti-patterns or caveats when integrating GenAI into engineering platforms and SDLC more broadly?
Well, thank you for reading that. So I think to what Sandra said a moment ago, I think there's definitely a couple of anti-patterns that we're seeing, or things that people need to pay attention to. And, we definitely are seeing in some organizations, quality may not be dropping in an obvious way in terms of bugs discovered, but what we are definitely seeing is the tendency to ship a lot more boilerplate code and not sort of spend the time to kind of refactor and keep kind of general application architectures clean does seem to be increasing, and that's not surprising, right? If the AI is going to just go ahead and give you a bunch of code that solves a problem, you're probably going to, and it works, you're going to take it. And the problem, of course, over time is that could start to lead to a bloat of more boilerplate code and architecture that maybe is not being cared for. And if we think about what a good senior engineers are doing in terms of keeping a code base manageable and healthy so that you can keep delivery velocity over time, I think that there's still, the jury's out, but I think there's still a risk of that. Also, Sandra mentioned exactly something we're seeing, which is, if you can write code faster, you may not be able to ship your code faster, because you have things like code review and you have other downstream processes that also may not be able to keep up. And one thing that we've seen is that organizations that have made the investment in good platform engineering, who can run CI/CD, a lot of parallelization, dynamic workloads, they're able to, compile and build and test a lot more code that is being produced. And that's important. Right? Because for sure, if the code review practices and other things are not smooth, if there are delays in those processes, then a lot of the apparent gains of being able to write code faster just kind of disappear into process bottlenecks that follow later. So I think that's another kind of, if not an anti-pattern, it's just an investment or a thing that people need to pay attention to, is that they've got good practices in place to ensure that code bases stay healthy and that architecture doesn't degrade over time. It's a lot harder to see. We're introducing bugs. Most people are tracking that with some data, but being able to know that architecture health is changing over time is not as easy to pay attention to. So I think that's really important. And the last thing that we are seeing, especially in the platform space, is that this tendency to use GenAI to solve the wrong problems. which is if just because you can use GenAI to perhaps interrogate logs faster, or we've seen a couple of organizations building a better chatbot for dealing with pipeline failures, right? And those problems are better solved upstream with better developer experience, and that's something that we also are a little bit worried that some companies who maybe haven't dipped their toe fully into thinking about developer experience as a first class team and a first class practice might think that GenAI is going to save them. And that, of course, takes away a lot of the benefits that you're going to get are going to have a glass ceiling, right? Being able to find issues faster in an opaque, pipeline logs is not really the right way to solve the problem. Oftentimes people need to redesign processes, redesign systems, and this might be allowing them to kick the can for longer in a way that appears like it's great now, but it won't serve them in the long term. So we definitely think that developer experience is really critical, understanding what makes developers' lives easy and not assuming GenAI is a panacea or a solution for everything.
And I think everyone has on their MBOs for the year that says you must have a GenAI product. I think that's one of the big challenges is that we're told, what is your AI solution for this year? Mm-hmm. Many people that may be infrastructure are looking like, what do you mean? Why am I going to put AI into my hardware? This doesn't make sense. Yeah. It is a challenge that everybody thinks that's that buzzword that you must have there. So I'm curious about where Chiradeep and Sandra kind of feel about the same topic. The advancements, rapid advancements, how are you approaching those and making sure that they don't come to bite you?
Yeah, well, we're kind of facing that situation that you were saying, that everyone has on their goals having AI somewhere. And we as platform team, the first challenge was how to integrate GenAI, the LLMs, as part of our productive platform, because we know that there's some difference between LLMs and the traditional ML solution that we already have in the past. But in this case was different because the users were moving ahead of us, they were asking for things that they just was they launched in the market in the morning, and they were asking us how come we don't have that already? That's part of my goals. I need that today, right? Mm-hmm. So facing the need of the technology, the knowledge of how to use it, as Ryan was saying, we have been also trying to give a lot of information or tools to the teams to understand if generative AI is the best way of solving that. Chatbots are everywhere, but if you don't have the data to answer the questions that your users are going to be asking, they are going to be useless, right? So that was the first one. The other, having in the platform all the security that we need, the PII identification. We try to have the basic guardrails at the beginning, because we know that some of the users might not have the knowledge to catch that before they are sending that to the LLMs. So that was first day one objectives for us, right? The first things that we tried to tackle was having everything established as we have for an ML platform for the LLMs before the users were running to have the tools. And finally, I think that is more how to make sure that we can scale, because normally we start to have these POCs and they get very excited that they are working. But when you want to scale that, we start to face a lot of challenges. Not only the time response of the LLMs that we know that sometimes are not the best, but also traffic, because all of the users want to go live today because it's their objective. So it's part of the challenges that we're having, how to scale and how to have the same things that we have for traditional ML for our LLMs in months, right? It has been a great challenge for us for having velocity here.
Chiradeep?
Sure. Yeah, I think like Ryan was saying earlier, with this build, operate, and learn loop, people jump into deploying production applications which face the end user directly. I think that's a big mistake. You have to learn by, developing internal applications which internal users only look at. And so you get familiar with what the limits of the LLM are, what you're missing. And the second anti-pattern I see is that they don't monitor the LLM response in production. So as I was saying before, quite a few of them are not to be shown even to internal users. And unless you have some kind of offline or even online evaluation of the LLM response, you could be getting into a lot of trouble. And quite often that just leads to, let's just stop using this LLM because we don't know how to fix it. So that's an important anti-pattern I'd like to highlight.
So based on that, what kind of recommendations, what kind of guidance do you offer those users or those companies, stakeholders that may be more hesitant about getting into that pool with GenAI? And that's going to be for Chiradeep. I'll start with you. We'll fold back over and come back around.
Yeah, so like I was saying, and that fear is, there's a couple aspects. One is the fear that, hey, I don't know what I'm getting into. The second is people have tried, ChatGPT of 2023 and said, oh, it never gave me good responses. And so then now they're like, oh, what's it going to do for me? It's just going to give me garbage. So I would encourage, people to get back into the latest LLMs and see their capabilities, which are like light years ahead of last year, and see that they can do very important tasks, multimodal tasks, and then try it out in internal applications first. Applications that face internal users that can give rapid feedback and not, stake the reputation of the company there.
Very smart. Sandra.
Yeah, I would like to add to that story. Something that has been repeated constantly, but we have seen a lot of value at that is human in the loop. Sometimes it's better like to semi-automate the process, still having someone in a part of the process and check that at least a sample of it to make sure that he's responding as expected. Not only for user facing, also internally we have found some funny stuff there. So it's also good to have some guardrails for internal, but it's not something to be afraid of. It's more like the process, right? It's not because the tool is a bad tool. It's part of the process of using that tool. So maybe going step by step and not expecting it to be magic and then get disappointed, right? So it's like how to understand how it works and use it properly.
Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely build on what Sandra and Chiradeep said. Like the human in the loop part is important. It's unfortunate that so much noise was made that GenAI was just going to automate everything and do everything because it set expectations that are really unreasonable. If you think of, in many ways, while it's amazing, it's kind of like improving IDE technology over many years, right? It takes away more and more of the non-value add or just the slower parts of a process, but clearly keeping the human in the loop is really important for many things. I think that the big thing for companies to become aware of is if you're serious about really getting the advantages of GenAI at scale and not just consuming the GenAI opportunities that come in the tool sets that you already have. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? At some scale, you should just wait and utilize the GenAI integrations that you get in the tools that you already have. But if you're really going to invest, I think, everything that Chiradeep has been saying is really important. There are many layers to a GenAI architecture, if you will. The LLM is just a small piece of it. There is this question of being able to quality check the results of an LLM over time. There's a lot of, there are tools now that are quite good at using LLMs on top of LLMs to be able to try to validate whether or not hallucinations happened, whether or not, you're getting an answer that does seem commensurate with the question. So the architecture required to do that is there are a lot of good tools are emerging that still need to be built. They need to be assembled by an organization. And so I think organizations really need to decide if they're going to go all in, then everything that Sandra and Chiradeep are talking about really requires investment. And I think there is a lot of gain to be had for it, but both in terms of having the knowledge of the tool sets that allow you to do this in a safer way, as well as having the process approaches that keep the human in the loop. both of those benefit like by making an investment and making sure that you have like what I tend to refer to as a Gen AI operating model, right? Like making sure that there are people who are acting as product managers that are thinking about what are we building and how do we build those things safely and how do we actually measure the effect of these. A lot of that is repeatable and it's shareable, and I think it's really important for organizations to know that they need to go all in on some architecture, guardrails, tools, and other things that teams will want to use to keep their applications safe, and people and process that works to make sure that we're measuring and that we're making the right decisions about what can be put in front of customers or internal apps. I think that these are the like any other major change, like people who have done this once or twice have learned a lot, and you want to kind of make sure that you keep reusing that experience across the organization and not let every part of the organization have to find all these things for themselves.
Lessons learned are important. I would agree. So this is really kind of changing the whole industry, all the industries. Let's be honest here. I'll be honest with that one. But how do you see it transforming the technical landscape? So if I push that, I'm going to skip around. I'm going to go to Sandra. We're going to go just rogue here. Sandra, how do you see it transforming the industry as we start to move forward? And it isn't just trends, but how it's transforming the way that we work.
Well, what I'm seeing is something that we were seeing before is like we are finding actually how to use it like everywhere, right? Maybe overestimating it a little bit, like that it can solve more things that it should. But I'm pretty sure that in some parts it's going to be useful, and the differentiator maybe is like here we can test and fail faster. It's like the difference maybe for me, because it helps us like to the iterations that maybe before it could take us 4 months or something around that. Now we can have like in 4 weeks, just like in a POC. It's not something in the productive side, right? But at least we can test and fail faster. That doesn't mean that the other process is going to be the same velocity, because we know that is not. But at least this first stage is going to change, or is changing already the way that we do a lot of things. And as I was saying, that we find it everywhere. It's somehow is making it easier for developers also. But in other cases, I think it is making it like difficult to understand how to use it, right? Because it's okay, I have to put it here. I'm not sure how. So we have like some skeptic part of the technology guys that they don't really want to use the technology. It's something like they don't believe on that, and others that are starting to understand or trying to see how to put it as part of their processes or day-to-day activities, right? So I think that's part of the difference. Just to give short answer, velocity is going to be for me the answer to your question. I think that's the way that is changing our way of doing technology.
Chiradeep, how do you think it's going to transform our industry and the way that we work?
Yeah, velocity is a very important term that, like Sandra said, everything's just going to get faster. Like previously, you want to do, like, say, sentiment analysis on your data. You throw it over to the ML team, the data science team that said, okay, we'll come back in 6 months. But today you can just test it out right now and, get some answers in a week. So that's very important. The other thing is I'm seeing more democratization. Like I was talking to a small business that was catering to healthcare, small healthcare. And they said that just regular doctors are saying, hey, I can use this to simplify my nurse's job. Can you develop an app? I have this, these kind of workflows in mind. And so I'm finding that, regular people who would never think about building software are now thinking, hey, something can solve my problem for me tomorrow. So that's encouraging.
Incredible. Ryan.
Yeah, I think just to get a little bit specific, I think the power for information retrieval, is a place where GenAI it's where it really actually shines. Like so much of these things like code completion and other things are forms of it and very specialized. But I think everything that we're hearing from Sandra and Chiradeep is really in that space of like, wow, the average user suddenly can ask questions of or experiment with information, not just data in the way we traditionally think about it. And I think that's really important because it allows us, I think a lot of organizations, a lot of technical organizations and other organizations are slowed down by the relatively hidden practice of people keeping information to themselves, right? And sort of needing to be experts. And so I think that there's a huge potential unlock in that democratization of information, which pushes us, of course, you need to have the information in a clean and fairly accurate form, and it needs to get into the right applications to be able to use it. But as Chiradeep said a couple of times, there's a bunch of types of applications that require correct answers and they require processes to be accurate. And that's really not what GenAI is good at. What GenAI is good at is getting close to things that humans would have really had a hard time doing, but not actually getting them exactly right. And so I think that the transformation in getting information quickly, I think might finally be seeing the enterprise search we've been hoping for 20 years. Because when the right data gets into, a RAG style application, like what GenAI will generate and kind of point you to is really phenomenal. I think it's really an order of magnitude or more faster than what we had in the past. But then, like we've been talking about, you have to be able to put that into your overall system and make sure that the right people are still in the loop to make sure that you can consume the results of that. So on the good side, having the right information at the right time might help us to build the right products faster and build types of products we hadn't quite imagined. Then our teams have to be ready to build those products, right? So to your point earlier about jobs, I think it's extremely probable that GenAI is going to generate a lot, and no pun intended, it's going to generate a lot more potential work to do, which means that suddenly we need to be better at planning, we need to be better at budgeting, we need to be better at monitoring the work that we do. And, and we need to we're going to, as engineering organizations, probably look less effective as suddenly expectations go up, right? That all of the business users all of a sudden think that they could just that everything's easy, because suddenly they get information in a way that they never could. And so their decision making maybe has been accelerated significantly, but still the burden of building software that works and that's safe, et cetera, is not going to get that much easier in my view. So I think that transformation is a kind of a subtle one that might be a bit of a problem for us, is, user expectations are going to continue to go up while engineering is still going to remain challenging, and it's going to get faster, but I don't think it's going to get as fast as people's expectations will grow.
So with the accelerated advancement and all that's out there, how do you, each of you, stay up on the newest trends and the newest products around GenAI? And I'm going to start again with Ryan here.
I have a distinct advantage as working for this global consultancy that has so many really, really smart people like working in all different areas, that we just, we have a great culture of sharing internally to our organization. So for me, a lot of what I do is just trolling chat channels and other things that we have internally, where there are people all over the world that are innovating and or working with clients who are innovating. And so it's an unfair advantage, to have 10,000 really, really passionate technologists all playing with this stuff and all talking to each other in forums that we have internally. Otherwise, I think, the thing that I think is really important is to try to find credible communities where people are talking about the tools. As a technologist, a lot of the core tools that are emerging, it's interesting to be in technical forums, listening to what are people using, finding to work. People that are in the technical domain. I think it's important to stay away from all of the high level. Now there's just a flurry of mumbo jumbo from all of the high level executive magazines about GenAI, and everybody's saying the same thing over and over. So I think it's at least for technologists to dig into technical forums and really listening to practitioners, talking about their experiences is a slightly more, it's a little bit more chasing than we used to have to do, but I think that it's still a much smaller audience and a much higher quality of information that goes through.
To get past that marketing and that unbiased view, I think is really, really difficult. I will agree with that. Yeah. Sandra.
Well, similar to Ryan, we have a big community internally in the company. Being 16,000 people is easier to catch everything that is happening. Particularly in the tech side, we have chats and communities where we are sharing everything that is coming. I also like to assist to some conferences, like sharing knowledge from other companies as well, so we can catch what they are doing. And as I was saying before, our internal users are very demanding. So that's the way sometimes they find things that are very new in the market, or things that are being tested. So they came to us, and well, that's one of the sources that I have to get new knowledge as well.
Chiradeep, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area bubble, and definitely the hype has far outrun the actual capabilities. I do attend a lot
Everyone
of
moved
meetups.
back, didn't they,
Yeah.
after the pandemic, and just
Yeah.
started doing AI. That's what
Yeah,
happened.
that's right.
Yeah, I attended quite a few meetups, try and meet the people who are actually, doing stuff in the field. But I find Twitter quite a great source of knowledge, at least the cutting edge research that's coming out. People are highlighting, there's probably like 100 papers published a day. There's no way to keep up. So some kind of filtering by these Twitter influencers really helps me.
Excellent. Excellent. So we're kind of winding down to our last little bit in this. I would love to know, start with each one of you here on kind of your last thoughts, anything that we didn't cover. I'll start with Ryan again. What do you feel like what is that takeaway that you think everyone should have as they've sat in and listened to us for the last 50 minutes or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway for me is again, everything we've been talking about. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. I think companies really need to invest. Like, there are many organizations that I still see are not, I see a lot of enterprises, and a lot of them are still just dipping the toe in the water, or even still kind of sitting on the sidelines doing the easy things. And I think any organization that has any scale, like, like Mercado Libre, if you've got thousands or tens of thousands of developers, I think you'd be crazy not to really dive in and establish internally teams that are there, whose job is to do some of the sifting through both what's happening inside your organization, what's happening in the market. Keeping up to date it's a full-time job, and assuming every engineer is going to do it, or even all people are going to do it, would be a huge mistake. I think you need to establish that kind of operating model, a team that owns making GenAI work for the organization, and then also can start to shepherd, the build out of internal platforms that allow for keeping the above the LLMs, keeping the apps that you build safe, keeping them secure. All of those things require investment, and I think for now, at least, I would tend to want to make some centralized investment to try to accelerate that, and not assume, as we often do, that democratize and let everybody go learn, but also really make sure that you're capturing that learning, and that you're making it usable, teaching and sharing things that are working across the organization. I think that's really the thing that we need to see a lot more of if people want to get the best out of the GenAI investments that they're going to make.
And put in some guardrails to make sure that it's a protected investment.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Sandra.
I could repeat everything that Ryan just mentioned, so I'm gonna go another direction, but something related to what you mentioned before regarding the jobs, right? So as we are seeing it, it's more a transformation. So right now, maybe there can be some jobs that are going to change more than others, but we are seeing this kind of investment is how to take away some of the day-to-day things that people is doing in order to make them do things that give more value to the company, and not only for developers, right? Also for legal people, for example. So for me, seeing in these conferences that I was saying before, seeing lawyers there, seeing doctors there, seeing people that normally is not part of this community, I think that's like the most I think that like the best things that these technology is giving us, right? Like not only for them to use it, but also to give ideas, because at the end, you all always are going to be needing the expert on the product or the solution to define it. So right now it's going to be, as I said before, multidisciplinary teams, but making it easier to understand what you need and how you're going to be building that. I think that's going to be a difference. So at the end, it's like transformation is my takeaway.
Yep. I come from very old school database administrators, mainframe, and it's funny how we've been watching them kind of evolve and change. And most of them were told your jobs wouldn't exist. And now I'm like, we just have new titles. It's not just me saying, well, I'm a director now. No, they're site reliability engineers, they're data governance people, they're data scientists. They're just moving in a new direction. They're like, we don't have DBAs anymore. And it's like, no, you just evolved their careers as technology changes. It's just same bat channel, different bat name. I mean, that's just kind of how it went. And a lot of people had to accept that, understand that. It wasn't that we're getting rid of things and those jobs were going away. The jobs have evolved. So we do too. Chiradeep?
Yeah, I'd like to take Ryan's message and address it to the individual developer or a small team that's thinking about it. Yeah, don't stay on the sidelines. Jump with your feet right in, not with a small application. Take those. There's some great courses out there to learn prompt engineering, to learn the right way to avoid hallucinations, etc. A lot of knowledge has been shared out there, so. If you don't do it, your competition is going to do it. So might as well get started with it.
It is interesting as I see so many different customers that I work with every day that wants AI into their solutions and building it out. And they are very concerned about what their competitor is doing, no matter if we're looking at fintech, healthcare, retail, anything in the public sector, as well as even, private sector. I mean, it's very fascinating as we watch everybody move forward. So we're kind of at their end here. I really want to thank everybody involved. Ryan, Sandra, Chiradeep, you guys were awesome. This was a great session. I think we had a great time, great topics. Conversation was excellent. I hope everybody is enjoying their day at the event. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and have a continued awesome event for the rest of the day here.
Thanks,
Kellyn.
Thank you.